right, let's bring in our political panel for the day. And joining us, Labor MP and member for Bennelong, Jerome LaSalle, is with us in his hometown of Sydney, along with Independent MP, member for Fowler, Di Lee. Welcome to both of you, Jerome, Di. Why don't we start, Jerome, with a bit of a sidebar issue. I do want to get substantively to the superannuation tax changes, but the sidebar issue, of course, is tax on the family home. What do you think it tells us about the psychology of the Treasurer in the hunt for budget savings that he didn't quite nail this one and rule it out when challenged to do so this morning, Jerome?
Well, we've had both the Prime Minister and now the Treasurer rule it out. I don't think anyone's keen on taxing her family home, and for very good reasons. I think that'd be an overreach, and I'm glad that the Treasurer has cleared his position and the Prime Minister have also ruled it out. Yeah,
it'd be politically poisonous too. Di, I won't necessarily get you to respond to that because it was a little bit of a...
another tax?
Yeah, it was a bit of a quirky development, but they seem to have stomped that one down. Di, why don't I take you, though, to the super changes themselves. Your position, it looks like a bunch of your colleagues on the crossbench, Di Lee, have kind of broadly fallen into line behind this after some doubts early on in the so-called national conversation. When the details came out yesterday, most of them gave it the tick. Do you?
Look, I obviously, you know, the superannuation tax and the amount that we're hearing, really my constituents do not fall into that bracket. First of all, the Fowler electorate, the $3 million, superannuation. But obviously, with my understanding is that, if that goes ahead, then that will put some money into the coffer for the government. Look, if that's going to be, taxing some of those people who are got that much money in the super, hopefully that will go towards, putting back into the economy and helping, obviously, electorates like Fowler, where we've got such a large proportion of significant disadvantaged population here. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the general intention, isn't it, to put it back into consolidated revenue and either pay down debt or, as you say, put it into government programs. Jerome, can I go back to you, though? There is this... reluctance or refusal by the government to index the $3 million cap. And over time, younger people, particularly in your electorate where I imagine incomes are somewhat higher than in Fowler, younger people through their working lives are going to start to trip over that cap. How is that fair?
Well, we know the average superannuation amount is about $150,000. That's a very, very long way from $3 million, Greg. We know that these very modest changes only impact 0.5% of Australians. 99.5% of us will have no impact at all. And I think 0.5% is less people than you can fit in the MCG. So this impacts a very small amount of people. And as Di said, returns, I think, about $2 billion to our budget each and every year, which we can use to pay down debt. We've got $1 trillion worth of debt that we were left with, and the population elected us to fix that. This is part of that proposal, and a very modest change at that. You'll see the Liberals kicking and screaming, and I'd really, really challenge them to reconsider their position because this seems to have broad support. Are they really going to go into bat for 0.5% of the population over 99.5% of Australians? I just find that extraordinary.
Fair point, but hand on heart, Jerome LaSalle, you must have had a little bit of feedback in your electorate from people who are among the 80,000 will be affected. They'd be none too pleased, wouldn't they, in the last day or so?
So I've got social media, I'm on WeChat, and I obviously receive a lot of emails and letters. Over the past 2 weeks, we've received 10 emails, which is very, very modest on an issue that's received such large attention, and have received no sort of social media posts about it today. But even if I had, Greg, again, when you're in government, you need to govern for all of Australians, not 0.5% of them. 99.5% of Australians will not be impacted by this change. And what it'll do, return much needed funds to an economy that was left in tatters by the coalition.
Well, thanks for your honesty. I think I probably agree. 10 emails probably doesn't amount to a massive electoral backlash, but we'll wait and see. Di, on the budget repair situation, which you've already touched on, the Treasurer has kind of said from this huge shopping list of tax concessions that were published yesterday, it's almost as if he's one and done on the $2 billion super tax initiative announced yesterday. It doesn't seem to be enough. Do you think the government should be revisiting other items on that list?
Oh, absolutely. I think the stage 3 tax cut. I mean, you know, it's interesting that, you know, they, you know, at the start when I got on into Parliament, one of the things I asked for that, you know, to ensure that, you know, the give tax cut to those on the low income rather than, you know, those that are on $180,000 or more. Hopefully you agree with me on this, Jerome. And I think that if they are able to do this, for the, you know, how many, you know, 80,000 people, you know, in the superannuation, I really call on the government and on the Treasurer and on the Prime Minister to really look at the majority of Australians who are on that middle income. I would even be bold to suggest to actually look at how we can make the taxable income, you know, higher, you know, up to maybe $65,000. So that way we could actually look after all the critical workers, those that are nurses, the teachers, the firemen, you know, childcare workers. So those people in those middle bracket can benefit. So, but that's probably an overall tax reform conversation.
Yeah, all right. Well, look, you know, either on stage 3, Jerome, or on other things that are on that list. I won't even attempt to read off the top 10, but negative gearing's obviously a huge part of it. The same question, why not go further? Why call it quits at $2 billion a year in recovered revenue?
Oh, look, well, we'll have a budget in May. This is one important bit of modest reform that's been put up on negative gearing. You know, that was taken to the 2019 election and the Australian population, you know, roundly rejected that. So that policy, and I think the Prime Minister said this and the Treasurer said this, that policy's dead. We'll be looking at other measures to ensure that, you know, we have budget repair. One of the ones that we did in the October budget was 99% of the increased income that we had back to the budget. You know, we'll respond to economic conditions as they arise. We'll be responsible, relief where we need to, and be responsible with paying down this debt and making sure that our finances stack up.
All right, hang in there with us, Jerome. Your connection's a little bit wobbly at times, but we'll get you to maintain your role in the conversation. Over to you, Di. You want to pick something up?
Oh yeah, I was just talking about election commitments, and I think, or what the government went to the election. They did not go to the election with the superannuation, you know, changes, and they're now doing it. So I think sometimes government, while they make promises, they don't necessarily follow through with the promises. So I think at this point in time, with the huge cost of living crisis in our community across the country, the government has to really look at ways to really find revenue, to, you know, to go, you know, where people are making money, companies making money, all of that in order to get the tax revenue that we need in order to support our economy and our community and our people.
Well, exactly. As they say, governments sort of get mugged by reality. And maybe we're getting a sign of reality for 2023 in those national accounts that came out today. Back to you, first of all, on this. Di, it does appear that it was doing as intended. The steam was coming out of the economy late last year. What we don't know is what happened through January and February, but it can't have been solid growth. So what the government's playing with here is pretty fragile. Di?
Look, you know, I mean, I know that, you know, discretionary spending, you know, I understand that it's, you know, in our community in Fowler, discretionary spending is not there. People don't actually have anything left over. And I remember a few weeks ago, you know, a woman selling food across the counter to me saying, you know, I work, everything goes out, I cannot save at all. So there's no saving at all. So the cost of living is so huge. It's increased tremendously. So I and the increase, the ninth, my understanding is the ninth increase in interest rate, that is going to, really impact our community in Fowler the most, from my perspective.
And it's going to get worse before it gets